Hello, everybody, and welcome to the second episode of TransMatter, a podcast that's by your boy Josh De La Ghetto, aka Josh Terefi. So for our second episode, I thought what else could be a really great topic to discuss. We kind of just went into masculinity for a bit, what it means for me, and I thought, wow, why not talk about stealth? And for those of you who maybe never heard of the term, not quite acquainted with it, stealth, from my experience in the community, basically means someone who is not openly identifying as trans. Now, over the time period, I found that has kind of meant something different to me each and every step of my life. When I was younger, I went to a community center and really started kind of not just my knowledge for the LGBTQ community, but also how can I propel that so that more people are aware, and not just about the surface things that I feel like is always connected or mentioned with our community when it comes to HIV and AIDS or not having proper healthcare access, but more so the idea that we need to constantly be at the forefront of what our needs are. And I do still feel that is true, but I think when I was younger and I thought about people being stealth, to me, it meant that people who were not a part of the community wanted no parts of the community, and to be quite honest with you, people that I didn't think deserved to hold the title in the community. Now, like I said, that was my thoughts previously. That is not my thoughts now. And the reason because of that is as you get older, you meet more people and you discover more different intricate ways that people have life experiences and how they survive them. And when it comes to being stealth, I kind of, as a younger person, only really thought about it in one or two ways. One, you don't want to be a part of the community, or two, you kind of want to benefit for the community and not be at the forefront. Although those are really problematic thoughts, I was able to break through and kind of compile different ways and reasons why people don't come out, and that it's not all necessarily pertaining to not wanting to be part of the community or hating the community. One thing that I really had to break down for myself was that there is no right and wrong when it comes to being stealth. I think as a younger person, I thought being stealth was not necessarily wrong, but wasn't on the best side of identifying with the community because it felt like you were part of maybe the problem and identifying with straight or cis folks who didn't want the community to excel or propel in a different way. But that's the number one thing I want to stress is that no one is right or wrong for not coming out openly as transgender. I don't think that there's any reason someone should feel that they have to push themselves to do so. And I think that it's ultimately up to you. Sometimes we do hear people say that they believe gender, sexuality is more of a private matter and not something to bring to the forefront. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with people who feel that way, but I do feel differently. And I think that was part of breaking down the misconceptions when it comes to people in the community identifying as stealth. So one of the first reasonings that I have on my list is safety. Safety is obviously very important because it can impact someone's ability to live their life, their day-to-day. It can impact their ability to have friends, social gatherings, jobs, all these different things. Safety not only looks like physical violence or not having physical violence, but also the safety of being in your own space mentally, emotionally, and feeling safe enough to be productive, to be happy, or to just be at least content with your everyday. And you'd be surprised how many trans folks are unable to feel content based on experiencing the outside world and how people portray their own thoughts or feelings onto us and expect us to have a normal or understandable reaction to ignorance or hate. So for someone thinking about their own safety, it can mean I don't want to come out as trans in general with this group of people or at this place, but it can also mean I want to identify in certain areas of my life and not others. As an example, I had a point in my life where I was constantly always either being outed or outing myself or telling people about my trans identity. But one of the things that really turned me off was the idea of walking into a social gathering and maybe not knowing 3 or 4 people and them knowing pretty much all about me because of the fact that I was an example for people, and walking into situations where I may be meeting someone for the first time and only knowing their name while they kind of have all this information harbored on me makes me feel unsafe in what ways they can use that against me, in what ways they can exploit me, or in what ways they have their own uncomfortability and feel that they can now take matters into their own hands and address me, whether physically, whether online, or any way that they really wish to. I've had experiences where people have tried to fight my friends or other people, and me being in the crossfire of trying to either calm that down or responding in a way that is standing up for myself. I've seen posts, I've seen things written about me, videos. I mean, I've even seen people write my name and disgusting things next to it on walls just to get a point across about their pretty much transphobia regarding me, and how that now gets crossed into any fire of any fight and being justified as a way to disrespect me because of however someone else feels. And for me, it's been something that's very minimal. And I've had times where people have yelled tranny at me walking down the street, and feel justified in that. And that's really unsafe to feel because you don't know who else around you is hearing that, is believing that, has the same bias, because a lot of the time there aren't allies or people sticking up to these people and saying, hey, that's wrong. It's kind of just gawking at it and feeling like, well, they shouldn't have been so openly like this or so openly saying this and this about themselves. When you put yourself out there, this is what you can expect. And obviously nobody wants to feel that. And I can see why being stealth and having safety go hand in hand is so important for some people. The next thing that I have written down is job security. That pretty much does tie into safety, but it is a very different reasoning in the sense that someone can be openly trans in their social settings, in their communities, with their family, and be accepted or not, unfortunately. But when it comes to having job security, I know a lot of trans folks who kind of put that to the side in order to get a job. And you have some jobs who, openly say like, hey, you won't be discriminated for this and this or this and this. But a lot of the times, if it is discrimination against trans people, it's not something that's going to be openly known or openly said to said person. So I know for myself, there has been times where, I identify as Joshua, my pronouns are he, him, they, them, and walking into a job, having to use my birth name because my paperwork is not changed, or not being able to have access to that, or I just moved. So moving and not really knowing what that process looks like. Different states, different countries have different legalities when it comes to that. For some people, it can be doing X, Y, and Z. And for other people, it has to be posting it in a newspaper, going to a judge, having witnesses, and all these different kind of ways to either make it more difficult or seem more verified by the law. So when it comes to job security, someone may deal with having their dead name or birth name used, having the wrong gender expression, being recognized by other people, just so that they can find a way to put money in their pockets and have food on their table, or even a house to live in. And I don't think that it's fair to exclude people who are not always openly out with their gender just because we want to see who's really part of this community or not. And as we keep going down this list, you'll see the different reasons why. So the next thing that I have written down is dating. I think dating is one of the biggest things I hear non-transgender folks talk about when it comes to trans people being stealth. Just being someone who's constantly on the internet, watching videos on YouTube, being on Reddit, there has always been a conversation around trans people not openly identifying themselves as trans the second they are talking to someone. And that can mean in person, on a dating app, in whatever way people are connecting. I personally just want to put it out there that I do not under any circumstance believe that a transgender person has to come out as transgender to a person they're dating, whether cis or not, about their identity until they are comfortable doing so. One of the main things that I hear is cis men complaining like babies about how trans women are not being open or honest about their identity right off the bat. And I think that a lot of the times coming out as trans can provoke a lot of questions, hate, and a lot of different topics that don't deal with the reason why we're communicating on whatever platform we are communicating on. I think a lot of times it opens up hate from people who are not interested in you in general, but have now a new way to access you and be openly discriminatory or hateful. And I think that being trans is not the core soul being of a trans person. I think it's an intersection to all the identities that they have and hold. And it's not something that is only what they're about. It can be something that takes a toll on their mental. It can be something that maybe, is a lot of their day thinking about. But a lot of that has to deal with the world and their perception, and not so much a trans person trying to hide who they are or anything like that. So I think when it comes to dating, it can be hard to explore a relationship or interact with people when you know right away, I'm going to get hit with this and this and this and this and this and this. And I can't get to the point of just saying like, hey, yeah, like I have dated X amount of people, or these are my experiences dating. This is what I'm looking for. These are the relationships I have. We never kind of get to the point of that discussion because it just automatically gets taken away. There are certain ways I think people are out. I know for myself, I've never been someone to truly be on dating apps, but I have used different apps, whether for connecting with people, hookup apps. And it's something that for me, since I know I'm solely there for one purpose, I do openly write it within my profile so that I don't have to deal with all the questioning. And if someone does ask me that, I tell them, hey, Google it for yourself, figure it out. But if you have respectful ways of asking me this, then awesome. I've had people ask me questions and I've told them this is disrespectful, this is why. But I think that people don't understand exactly how much energy that takes out of a trans person to do when you're maybe talking to 5 or 6 people daily or whatever it may be. So I can see why being stealth and trying to see how people are engaging or interested in your personality is a reason to maintain your stealth identity. And I think that when it comes to sexual relations, that is a different conversation. But I don't think that trans people are hiding or trying to lie. I don't want to say that there's no experiences in which maybe someone hasn't told someone or has covered the truth up in whatever way. But I just want it to be known that I don't think the majority is that. And I don't believe that it ever will be that. I think that stealth is a lot of the times kind of like the first reasoning, deals with safety, and it deals with maintaining or preserving our energy and our sense of being in the world. Some days we're up to answering more questions and some days we're just not, and that's totally okay. The next reasoning I have is I think one of the most popular reasonings I've heard when facilitating groups. So for those of you who may not know me or know the work that I've done, for 10 years, I've done so many different types of LGBTQIA groups, facilitating them, being a part of them, supporting others. And as a person who's facilitated trans groups, one of the biggest things I hear is not wanting to be the token trans person. So basically what that means is not wanting to be the spokesperson, the representative of all trans people. And I can totally understand that. I think when people know you're trans, they feel that that information isn't something that is so sacred, or they don't understand the different levels of why it might be complicated to share that information. I've had people who have shared my gender identity not out of, malicious intent, but rather to be like, isn't this so cool? Or isn't this amazing? Isn't he so just normal, right? And I think what's interesting is that for other people, they have maybe a similar reaction, but it's also tied in with the boundaries of questioning are now no longer there. So if I have a question about trans people that I've had this whole entire time or my whole life, or these misconceptions, I can ask you this and I have the right to, and you have to answer me, because if you don't, now I have this view of how trans people are problematic. They don't want to break things down for us. They kind of want to keep it exclusive, but always hate us as straight or cis people, or people who just don't know things about the trans community. That is fucking stressful, guys. Like, honestly, it's stressful. I think, as someone who facilitates a group, walking into a group and knowing that you maybe will explain things or offer support to people is one thing. But I think thinking when you go to a bar or when you're at a family party, when you're at your best friend's birthday dinner, you don't want in between your cuts of potato and steak, someone's just asking you personal questions, either about your genitalia, either about your facial hair, either how your process all happened. I mean, it's all about wanting to be there, having the energy to be there, but it's also that there's a time and place for everything. And unfortunately, I don't think that we have a lot of people who understand how to engage and talk with trans people and understanding the idea that they can just ask, hey, can I ask you a personal question before asking? Or, hey, can I ask you a question about your transition before asking? And not necessarily jumping to the specifics of what's your surgery, what's your medical transition looking like, but going beyond that and saying, how does it help you feel? Or how have you changed from this? Or how do you feel better if you do? And I think allowing the trans person to take navigation in their own story and journey and then breaking that down is amazing. But I think that being the token trans is not an attractive thing. And I think it doesn't just go to being trans. I think we hear about tokenness when it comes to people's race and different identities. So being the token, whatever, or feeling that you have to have all the right answers is very stressful, especially when I think trans identities are so vast and different that there's no way someone's going to give you a definition of what it means for them, and that's going to match even one other person. I think there's similarities in ways that we can kind of maybe group in some ways, but I don't think anyone's definition, or I've never even heard anyone's definition all being the same when it comes to what their trans identity means. So, yeah. The next thing is comfortability within my skin. So one of the things that I kind of really didn't understand when I first started facilitating adult groups, specifically people over the age of 18 and 21, was the idea of not wanting to identify with a gender identity that they felt did not match how they looked physically. There were two instances in which I was facilitating a group and I had two members who, I would say maybe during the middle period of our group, felt comfortable using her, she pronouns. But in the beginning of meeting them, did not want those pronouns. And I remember one of the things that they would say is, this is the name I want to go by. These are the pronouns I want to go by, but not yet. So for now, you can use this name, this pronoun. And I remember having one-on-ones and checking in with them and talking to them and asking, hey, like, if you know this is true for you, you know you're in a space where it's going to be respected, if anything, more than anywhere else, why not come out as that? Or why not feel comfortable, especially if you can't do it outside of these rooms? And I remember one of the things that she had told me at that time was, I don't feel that I match who I see myself as. I know I'm in a room where I can be respected. I know that there are people who care. I know that people who are listening. But I do want to match what I think and how I feel. And for me, that's what matters the most. And for some reason at the time, I kind of kept pushing. I kind of kept saying, yeah, but you're here. Yeah, I didn't really understand. And I think when I walked away from the group that night and I went home, I kind of understood it. It's not just about, hey, all these people can see me for me, but it's about, do I see me for me? And if I feel that my name is Macbeth, for an example, then I know that I'll be there, and I know that I'll feel comfortable saying that. And when meeting people, I'll feel comfortable saying, this is my pronoun, this is who I am. But I'm not there yet, and I don't want to force myself to get there yet, because it is something delicate, and it is something that I'm working towards. And I think at the time I was very ignorant to it and had learned that that's just someone else's journey and process, and it's different from mine, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't make sense. And when it came to having groups and more discussions, I do feel that majority of the time that I had these similar reasonings or things being brought up in group, it was within the trans femme community. And I think that a lot of that does have to deal with the ignorance and hate and violence and just disgustingness that people put on to that part of our community on a daily, that makes it hard for people to say, I can exist within my gender expression or identity comfortably, regardless of how other people see me as a woman, or even, as a non-binary person, as a transmasculine person. But I do think that the ways that trans women are held or regarded to their gender norms, or their supposed gender norms rather, really pushes people to not feel that they can have a space to identify as comfortably or as openly with strangers, because of those reasons. So the next one that I had is family first. So this for me was one of the most important things about coming out, especially when it came to having family and friends on Facebook. I early on had both my birth name, my chosen name in my Facebook, and been avoiding family, not really adding them, not necessarily putting myself in a position to add them, then block them or have hidden content. It was kind of just like, if I can avoid adding them, just have them sit in that inbox. They won't have to see that my identity is this, or that I'm using these names, or whatever it is, or have the ability to message me and ask me, why are you doing this? Or why are you posting this? Or what's this flag about? So it felt like for me, it was a safety thing that I can do, but it was really just because I didn't want my mother or my father to be seen as people who were incompetent as parents. A lot of the times I think LGBT people are kind of seen as these like problem children, or there was something you didn't do right, or there wasn't a man in your life. There's always this reasoning of what your parents did wrong for you to end up like this. And I felt that I had a home, I had food, and even though I did receive some different abuse or things like that from other people, I never had that within my home. I felt that my parents, were safe. Even coming out and having our issues, when I brought up the fact that being trans was so important to me, that I would move out, that I would not need their help, that I would do whatever I could to sustain myself, and hearing them say no, even though the relationship wasn't salvaged just yet, I knew that there was a matter of care and love there that I was very lucky and privileged to have, especially being someone who is trans and also Black, as some intersections. And so one of the things I didn't want was that because I was openly trans or accepted by people, that then people would inbox my mother or see her at family events and just say, what is wrong with your child? What is it? Why did you do this? Why are you letting them do this? What is wrong with you? And my mother is someone who had me at a younger age. And so I think that now at the point where she's at, she's kind of like the stereotypical suburban mother. But at the time we were from the city, teenage mom, I think that people already looked down on her and thinking about how she would raise me, that I didn't want this added thing to be like, of course this happened. He didn't have his father in his life, or he grew up not knowing these things, or his mother was so young. Of course he went down this path and he's a horrible human being. Of course, he's trans, and, equating that to not being a good human. And that really bothered me to the point where I just felt like I didn't want to contact family. I didn't want to go to family events because I didn't want people to hate my mom. And that was my own concern and own thing that I had to work through, and eventually work through with my mom and have that conversation. But when there was a point where I had been on testosterone for, I don't know, maybe over 6 months, there were just certain things that were kind of unavoidable with how I looked, with slimming down, or facial hair, or my voice, or just appearing different, to the point where my family kind of, I wouldn't say out me, but asked me questions. It was like, are you on testosterone? Do you identify as trans? Because they were starting to hear it in the media so much that when I said yes or anything like that, I was met with open arms, and, luckily didn't have to come out to so many people about changing my name, and, really embraced and loved by everyone, immediate family and extended family. And that was something that, I never thought of, but, my mother has met her fair share of people who have asked her questions or have brought up their opinions on trans people or me. And my mother has always just had the best intent. It's taken a lot of time for her to get to the point now where she says, I have 3 sons. My eldest son is this age. Before, it would be so hard for her to tell people anything. She would say, what do you want me to tell people? I said, say you have 3 kids. That's it. When they ask you more questions, you can elaborate if you wish, but you have 3 sons. There's nothing that you have to change when talking except for pronouns and names. And she's at a point now where it's pretty much flawless and really inspiring. And I just didn't want her to receive all the trans hate and backlash that I might get online to her, especially she doesn't know how to use the internet that great. So I just didn't want any of that to now be her plight or like something now she has to carry, because it was me and it deals with me. And at the end of the day, that's who it's always going to be about. But I was very lucky, and I just am so grateful, but also, it's something that is very real, especially for people who are in super strict religious homes. Even if they are estranged from their family and moved away, or, all these like kind of terrible stories that I often do hear, they still don't want their parents to be disregarded in their own communities. And that just shows how much love and compassion trans people have, even when it comes to people who disregard us or don't treat us with the same respect and intent, And so we're about to hit the last 2. Specifically, this one I thought was pretty relevant and interesting to talk about because I think it ties into what I was saying about my misconceptions as a younger person when it comes to being stealth. And that has to deal with not feeling like you're politically in the stance of transness. So I've talked to some people who say, I identify as trans, or, I don't openly or only go to groups, or et cetera, because I don't want to always have to deal with feeling like if I don't sign this petition, if I don't make this video, if I don't make this tweet, if I don't show up to this rally, that I'm a bad trans person because I'm not politically getting involved. And I don't know if that's something that you all are kind of like dealing with or know people who feel that way. But for me, I was like, damn, that is valid as fuck. I have not thought about that. As someone who's had a really bad history with police corrections facilities, whatever you want to call it, the disrespect, the things that I've gone through as a trans person just for being assumed, follow, whatever. I always felt this guilt when I would get text messages about coming out, not to events, but to actual, rallies or petitioning or things that kind of involve being out in the street rioting with community members, because of the fact that I was always I would just have this feeling that I would be the one from the sea of people that they go, let's arrest him. Or like he's the target, or let's hit him extra hard. I've had friends who have gone to these rallies who have stand up for the trans injustices, for the people who have passed away and have been arrested or have been taken, have been hit, have received stitches, people who have really been affected just by saying what you're doing is wrong, or we deserve this. And for myself, it became something where it was like I was pretty much teetering on losing everything, or being able to go to school again, or being able to get a job. And I always would feel this tremendous amount of guilt as a trans person that I wasn't doing enough because I wouldn't do those things. Or, I think it's one thing to be informed, but I think it's also different when you feel that you have to explicitly be there to feel like a good trans person, but also while being there, there are photos being taken, there are videos being taken, and in a way it is outing yourself. Even if you say like, hey, I'm just this ally, I'm just here supporting, a lot of the times even just being an ally is looked down upon, or people just being like, yeah, right, why are you here? You are a part of this community. And I've seen that happen to people I know who have appeared in like New York City Pride, which is often televised, and that being kind of a different type of political movement, and being outed in that way and not realizing like, oh crap, like I'm standing in the forefront of something. Of course it's going to be televised. Of course it's going to reach the masses. And I think that moving on to just being political, it does have this tie of like, I'm not doing enough, or I'm not enough, or this is another community that maybe I'm not a part of. And I don't think that's true. I think it's okay if you don't necessarily feel like you want to be out because you want people to actually, well, who are you voting for, and why? Or how could you say that this is your opinion? It's so hard because I think we do want people to be educated and understanding what's happening and why injustices are so wrong. But we also don't want people to feel forced into feeling like they have to go into these things. And as much as it sucks, and a lot of times people feel, you know, very sensitive about it, there are trans people who are not going to have the same regard as being open-mindedness, but it is their right to exist, whether that mean openly or not. And so last but not least, coming out on my own terms. Coming out on my own terms is basically saying that for me, I'm stealth until a point, or I'm stealth with certain people. It kind of means having the power yourself to tell people, this is my story, this is who I am, to have that moment with someone rather than that moment be taken from you. After high school and going to a college out of state, I started going to school back in New York City. And one of the things that kind of started hitting me my first few days of school was the idea that no one knew I was trans. I had not introduced myself to someone and they thought I was, or they knew my past, or they knew a friend of mine, because I had chose a school that was so far away from everything and everyone I knew growing up. And it was this weird, refreshing thing that I didn't know how to go about. Like, every day that would go by that I knew someone that didn't know my identity, it almost felt like I felt guilty for not telling them that I was trans. Like, it literally felt like, you're holding this back, you're holding this back. And it took time for me to realize that I didn't owe anyone anything. And that for myself, what I've always wanted was being recognized and received into this world as someone who identifies as male. And what that means is using he, him, them pronouns. Maybe not necessarily that male and he, him pronouns go together, but that was what was important for me. And without having these conversations and actually being recognized as myself, it was so refreshing to think these stresses are no longer a part of my day. Like, I didn't have to say you use the wrong pronoun or you use the wrong name, because people didn't have an old name to refer to me as, like they did in my previous college, because I went to college with people that I had went to high school with, and they had all this tea or different information on me. So if I told someone, hey, I go by Josh, I could leave the room and they'll be like, yeah, they used to go by this name, they went to school with me. It was the first time that I was able to say Josh and not have to say he, because people assumed it and were correct. And I gotta say, that is a really big privilege for me to have. And it was really powerful for me because it gave me complete control, like to be in the driver's seat. I remember one day after class, I had befriended these two guys. We had known each other for, I would say, maybe 3 months at this point. We had always shot the shit, before class, during class, after class. We would invite each other out. We would go to eat somewhere together, go get drinks. And I really felt like I had a really good brotherhood with these guys. I mean, everything was always fun. We always had a good time. And then one day I really felt the need to come out for some reason. And it was really hard for me. And I said, hey guys, I just really want to tell you something. And they were just like, nigga, what? Like, what are you talking about? Like, what's up? Why you being so serious? It's weird. Knock it off. And I remember in that moment just feeling like, whew, deep breath. Here it goes. I'm transgender. I'm trans. And then they both just start laughing, right? Not necessarily laughing in a explosive, negative way. Just like, what? What do you mean? And I was like, I'm trans, I'm a trans guy. It's just, you guys are really cool. You guys seem like people I want to be friends with for pretty much the rest of my life. And I've just never made friends who just never knew my past. And I don't know. It's not something that's a secret, but it just felt like I should tell you guys. And what was interesting in that moment is that they were just like, nigga, I don't care, bro. Like, we've been chilling all this time. It is what it is. Like, you're good. But what was interesting was that they had questions, not necessarily about me, but about what does even trans mean, or who identify, what does the community look like, or all these different questions. And what was interesting is that when I was coming out to them, they thought that I was coming out as a trans woman to them. And I broke it down for them that no, that wasn't what I was saying, that being a trans man or trans woman or trans fluid or non-binary, all these different terms can mean certain things, but maybe you're thinking about it in this way, or you have these, pre-connotative thoughts, or you have these different ideas that you don't really know what it means to be trans, or you've never had someone you could ask questions to or be that open guide for you. And for them, I was that, and it was really cool because not only were they receptive to it, but, I was able to say, like, that isn't a question you should ask anyone. But maybe I'll answer this for you right now so you can kind of get a general, idea, or being like, hey, this is what you can Google. This is what website you can check on. And believe it or not, people are kind of interested in that. And I think that helps with not having to use all your energy to explain everything constantly and maybe re-traumatizing yourself. But when people are interested and want to know, they will. And I really always use that as a teaching moment because of the fact that, not everyone's going to respond the way you think they might. But it's also important to know when you should come out to people and when you shouldn't. And even if it's 1% of I shouldn't, then you shouldn't. For me, I felt very safe in that time to say this was my identity. And, there was a lot of reasons that previously held me back from ever coming out to those guys. First of all, being in Queens, I'm not from that area. Being in a school I know nothing about. Being involved with two people who one of them was a drug dealer and a gang member. And having to think about, well, if I come out to this person, he knows how I move. Is it like he can call me, see what block I'm on, get me, and even though some people might think that's such a whole plot, it's something that is very real and happens all the time to trans people and to people in general. And so it's all of these different reasonings that tie into each other that ultimately go into the first reason, which is safety. And these are all the reasons why I think someone can identify as stealth and be totally justified. But also, I don't think that stealth is something that always has to be hard or soft in a way. I think a lot of times we hear soft stealth being kind of like what we're discussing about choosing who, what, where, when, how, and something like hard stealth sounding like I'm always this identity. I always don't talk about it. I always don't bring it up, or I don't identify. I think that there is a balance between the two. I think you can find that balance for yourself. It can be a spectrum. And I think that whatever it is that you feel that you need to do at any point in time is important. I think in the 90s or early 2000s, being stealth really meant I don't talk about it in general, or I don't discuss this with anyone. It's just for me, or it's just a private matter, and who I choose to maybe discuss it with, maybe one or two people. But I think nowadays, also with so much technology, a lot of people are trying to find that balance between soft and hard stealth, and what does that mean for them. And I just want to reiterate that there really is no right or wrong when it comes to it. And so if you feel like being stealth is what you need right now, then do it. If you feel like not being stealth or finding ways to push the boundary, do it step by step so you can see how you feel when you're in uncomfortable situations and navigating how to get comfortable, or navigating, okay, I want to get to this point of being out maybe, or being in the community. What are the steps that I can take that feel right without putting myself in some extreme uncomfortable situations? All right, everyone. I just want to say a huge thank you if you've listened to this whole podcast. If you've listened to the last podcast, it really means the world to me. If you did like what you heard, you know what I'm saying? You could like it. You could share it. You can make sure you put your homies on, your friends, everybody you know. Make sure that you put them onto this podcast. It's really important that we keep this thing going. I'm really excited that I'm able to do projects like this. If you like this topic, feel free to hit me up on this channel or my Instagram, which everything will be provided down below in the description. It was really amazing getting to share some of my ideas with you all, and I really would like to hear what are your ideas and what are some maybe future topics you want to talk about. I put a poll up on Instagram, and I saw that a few of you were interested in some of my high school experiences, and so that's going to be coming out to you guys soon. I just want to say thank you again, and this was TransMatter episode 2, and we'll see you next week for episode 3. I'll holla at you guys. Holla back at me, all right? Much love. I hope you all have a great week. And please don't forget to spread some love to some folks, especially our healthcare workers who are working their asses off right now to make sure that we're safe and that we're able to stay at home and do these things like podcasts, okay? So stay home, be safe, and, just make sure to thank a healthcare worker if you know them. Much love. Peace out. This is TransMatter, the podcast with your boy, Josh De La Ghetto.